Good morning, or actually it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. Martin. Good afternoon, Dr. Robinson. Really glad everybody's here. Everybody, I want to welcome to Creating Equity in STEM, a four-part LinkedIn live audio series presented by CPASS Foundation, featuring conversations with distinguished professionals in the STEM and STEAM fields. By exposing and educating Black and Brown students on the educational pathways and career opportunities STEM and STEAM have to offer, CPASS Foundation leadership and partners create a trusted pipeline to activate more schools, families, and communities to decide to engage more young people to choose technology and healthcare careers. I'm Ginger Birkenbeuel, brand advisor, writer, and host of this conversation. Today, for part one of our four-part series, we're having a vibrant conversation with Dr. Derek Robinson, Vice President and Chief Medical Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. Dr. Robinson is Vice President and Chief Medical Officer for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois and leads many community efforts to promote diversity and inclusion in undergraduate and postgraduate education. We will learn about Dr. Robinson's incredible journey from preschool to medical school and also gain his insights into what we can do to ensure there are more Black and Brown students in the pipeline to medical school. Then we need to understand strategies for how to best help Black and Brown graduates find and earn opportunities in prestigious hospitals and corporations. Thank you so much for joining us today. This conversation will not be recorded. LinkedIn does not yet have a setup to record LinkedIn audio chats. Hopefully that feature will be coming soon. I would also invite you to join us next Tuesday, April 25th at 10 a.m. Central for part two of our conversation series of Creating Equity in STEM. I will be featuring former Google engineer, founder, and career coach Anthony D. Mays. On behalf of the CPASS Foundation, formerly the Chicago Area Health and Medical Careers Program, I want to take a moment and thank all of our program and strategic partners, donors, key stakeholders, and the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus who have supported our mission at the CPASS Foundation. If you or your company are interested in supporting the CPASS Foundation's mission and scholars, please go to cpassfoundation.org/invest-in-us to learn how to give. Let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Robinson. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So glad to see you again after all this time from our last conversation with Dr. Michael Eric Dyson when we were trying to understand how to get more Black doctors pipelined into medical fields. Before we sort of get a little bit more into your professional experience and your network, I would love for you to share a little bit about your current role at Blue Cross Blue Shield and what is the desired impact you hope to make there?
Ginger, happy to do so. First, let me say good morning and good afternoon to the audience. And again, congratulations to you and Stephen and all the folks at CPASS Foundation that continue to do great work here in the Chicago area. As you noted earlier, I currently serve as Vice President and Chief Medical Officer at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois. I lead a team of nearly 750 nurses, doctors, social workers, and other healthcare professionals that work tirelessly to help support our care management programs, utilization management programs, and quality improvement efforts for our more than 8.5 million Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois members. Our work is very much centered on helping improve the health of our members and also working collaboratively with our hospital and healthcare providers across the state to really help transform our healthcare delivery into a high-value healthcare delivery system, and also to advance health equity as part and parcel to that work. And so it's been a joy to work with a great team here, both within our walls and beyond our walls in the state, as well as with partners across the country.
I love that you've been spending so much time working in this. I'd love to know a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? Why did you attend Xavier University of New Orleans? And how did you find your way to the medical field?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So while I've been in Chicago for more than 20 years now, I'm actually a native of Shreveport, Louisiana. That's where I was born and raised, and talk a lot about my journey and growing up in Shreveport in my new book, Improbable MD, from the Bayou to the Boardroom. As I settled on a desire to pursue a career in medicine, I had a really pivotal conversation with a physician with whom I've never met in person, who was the daughter of one of my mother's coworkers, and she was a Xavier graduate. And as I sat at my house, probably around this time, many decades ago, this time of the year, with a lot of college acceptances, and I was trying to figure out where to go, she told me it was very important for me to land at an institution that would be prepared to provide me with all the support and resources and guidance that would be necessary for me to be successful in pursuing my career goal. And more importantly, an institution that had a track record and could show data to back up their promises to me. And she said that institution would be Xavier. And as I look back on that conversation, she didn't ask me about my GPA. She didn't ask me about my ACT or SAT scores. She really approached the conversation with a very positive, from a very positive perspective, believing in my potential and wanting to ensure that I landed in a good, nurturing environment. And then the other thing she said was, if you continue that journey, you're going to have an opportunity to attend schools all across the United States, but you've got to get through that door to medical school first, so you got to sequence it the right way. And I made a decision trusting her guidance because she was someone who had been down that path before. And it was a phone call, but it was very impactful.
Wow, I love the fact that you use the word sequencing. I mean, that's just a really beautiful way to describe what needs to happen for us. And that actually leads me to my next question. I mean, I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but Black and brown people like us, we have so many barriers to accessing opportunity. It sounds like you had someone to guide you and to help you and to give you ideas. When you look back on your journey to becoming a doctor, what do you feel was your greatest hurdle and who helped you climb? Now, you just mentioned this wonderful mentor that you had, but maybe there were some others. Who helped you climb, knock down, or barrel over some of the things that were in front of you?
Yeah, and I would say that I wouldn't even describe the doctor I spoke with as a mentor. She was someone who was willing to take time out of her day to have an impactful conversation.
Okay.
I would say that a couple of things. One, I had the good fortune of having a strong educational foundation in the public school systems there in Shreveport, and I really have my mother to thank for that, for being a very strong advocate for helping ensure that I was in the best public schools that we had. I would say initially the challenge that I faced was believing that my dream could come true, because I did not interact with individuals in my community who looked like me, who were physicians. And so there was often kind of the question of whether what I, in my mind, desired to achieve was really possible. And because of my family background and community background, I also didn't want to reach for that star and fail and then have to deal with the embarrassment associated with that. And so get in that direction and go to Xavier, I think was really a great step in the right direction. I'd say the next barrier I faced was probably, what we would describe today as academic redlining and discrimination as I was applying to medical school. I was talking with some young people just the other day, and one of the things I shared with them is I got a lot of thin envelopes in the mail when I was applying to medical school. And so I was very fortunate that I had an opportunity to attend Howard University in Washington, D.C. For medical school. But, looking back on it, the assessment of the majority of the medical schools that I applied to in the United States was that, hey, I was not qualified or capable of becoming a physician. And that's a barrier that I think many individuals still face.
It's interesting you mentioned thin envelopes, because when I think of a thin envelope, I think of something positive, checks and letters of yes.
No, thin envelope means, you don't have a return envelope inside for you to sign some paperwork and put it inside of that envelope, put a deposit in there and that kind of stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Thin envelope is, we thank you for applying.
Oh my goodness.
I encourage you to reapply next year.
What an amazing visual. I mean, honestly, that's just so tremendous. I want to talk just a little bit about your book. You mentioned it earlier. You wrote Improbable MD, From the Bayou to the Boardroom. That's actually a book for those who are listening. You can purchase on an independent bookstore called bookstore.org, or you can actually purchase it online through, there's actually a Black-owned bookstore in Chicago, and I'm going to remember the name in just a moment. But can you tell us about the book and why you actually wrote it? And did writing this book change your career in any way? And I ask this question because a lot of us have a book in us and we want to write. And I don't want, this whole conversation to be about how did you do the book, but I'm so excited when I found out you wrote this book. And every time I go look at your profile on Instagram and LinkedIn, I'm always looking for more information about you talking about your book. Can you tell us about this book and why you wrote it?
Thank you for the opportunity. If you'd asked me 5 years ago if I would have written this book, my answer would have been no. I think it was a confluence of things. I think certainly the pandemic's impact on me as a physician, as a family member, as a community member, certainly heightened my personal need for outreach and engagement, and the ability to reconnect and to motivate and stimulate others. I've benefited so tremendously over the years from individuals who have opened doors for me, who poured into me, who served as mentors, served as sponsors. And then I've also had a chance to serve as a mentor to many young people, and some of the work that I did in Chicago with the Capital Leadership Institute of Chicago for about 10 years. And then some other work with Cap Alpha Size Achievement Academy on a national level. And so I knew the impact of engaging with folks and sharing your story and helping them change the lens through which they see their future and their possibilities. And then I felt that personally as well. And so I thought it was important to share my career journey, because I think that I have hit some milestones of success. And I want to ensure that as young people and young professionals and even parents look at me, they also have an opportunity to see the journey that I've traveled, the blessings that I've received along the way, and then how some challenges were really disguised as things that were preparing me for the future. Because I think when we as leaders don't have those in-depth storytelling opportunities, we miss the opportunity to inspire individuals who may have backgrounds or circumstances or challenges that are very similar to ours, but all they see is sort of the LinkedIn profile or the Instagram profile or the title and organization that you're affiliated with. And so much of the positive rewards that we experience in life have to do with how we impact and interface with others. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to do that. And I would say in some ways it was also therapeutic for me. In the book, I talk about some of the health challenges and other life challenges that I've experienced with family members and directly. And so it really forced me to really think through and reflect on those journeys. And I think that can be impactful. And then I think it's also encouraging for parents, because I was one of those kids where the teacher called home the first day of school, probably K through 4. And so there is hope for parents who have kids that are busy, that are very talkative and engaging, and the teachers are sort of like, I don't know what to do with this kid. And so there's a lot to gain. In terms of changing my career, I don't think that there's been a significant impact on my career as of yet. If you ask me that question in a couple of years, I might have a different example, but I would just say that my intent and purpose was not for career transformation, but really for reconnection and inspiration to others.
I love that. I also love your interest in helping other people. When I mentioned this conversation to several people in my own network, and I have a quite extensive network of people in healthcare equity in Illinois and beyond. A couple people said, "Oh my goodness, Dr. Robinson is amazing. He's been had such an impact on my career, my life. He's come in to speak often at my events, and we even go to church together. I just, you have such a wonderful outward appearance and reputation. And I really do think it's because of what you're talking about now, caring about other people and helping guide, especially black and brown students, to help them figure out how they can get through this. You mentioned redlining in medical school. That's something that I didn't even know that existed. Of course I know about redlining, but just the idea that there's an ecosystem of redlining that goes way beyond real estate is fascinating. I want to learn more about that later. I want to move on a little bit to talk a little bit about your professional experience and your network. I've actually got a friend that has not achieved the minimum necessary MCAT scores for medical school admission consideration. I want to understand, is it just having the ability to be a great standardized test taker, or is it ensuring that our high school scholars are at least exposed to critical thinking classes, advanced science classes, and calculus? I feel like medical students and physicians will be taking tests for the rest of their careers, right? It does not stop with the ACT, SAT, and MCAT. It seems like a real, just a whole system of confusion and despair and hope for some, right? So what do you think, what can we do to expose our scholars to the skills needed to achieve a good MCAT score, right? And just as a side note, CPASS Foundation actually provides free Kaplan MCAT test prep to URIM students who graduated from Illinois high schools. But back to the question, what can we do?
Sure. So I think the answer to the first part of your question is a both and this was similar to the advice I would give the high school students that I mentored for many years about standardized test taking, that it tests both your knowledge as well as your ability to take that exam. And I always encourage individuals not to feel defined by their exam score. Certainly, as we look at the MCAT, we know that the individual's preparation, academic preparation in terms of courses that are taken in STEM can play a very important role in building that knowledge foundation, as well as exposure to labs and the sciences is important as well. But then we also have to take into account that there are other factors that contribute, to test performance, including your preparation for how to take the exam. There was a study that was released in JAMA Network here just recently that looked at about 82,000 MCAT exam takers over a 3-year period. And one of the things that they found in the analysis was that, Black and brown MCAT examinees, about 1 in 3 did not have a parent with a college degree versus 1 in 5 whites. And so they viewed that as a proxy for the wealth or financial health of that exam taker's family. And in fact, those same examinees had reported in their survey that they had more difficult affording MCAT preparation materials, and they also were less likely to take a private MCAT preparation course compared to white exam takers. They were also less likely to apply to medical school and less likely to attend medical school, and more likely to have a pre-health advisor that negatively influenced their decision to pursue a career in healthcare. And so there's a lot circling around both MCAT and preparation and performance, and then also how that score is used. I use the term academic redlining, which actually is part of an article that was published on the same topic. And one of the things that they noted in the research there is that students that have MCAT scores kind of in the middle 1/3 of the range, evidence has shown that those students actually are successful in medical school and they pass their step 1 and step 2 board exams, although many medical school admissions committees may set their threshold for accepting applicants at scores that are much higher. And one of the things they found in those students who are in that middle 1/3 is they're more likely to be a first generation college graduate. They're more likely to be from a rural environment or a medically underserved environment, and they're more likely to be African American, Hispanic, or American Indian. And so when we look at things that we need to do in this area to help improve performance of folks like your friend, one is we need to ensure that we've got better pre-health advising, which is going to be critical. We also want to ensure that we're emphasizing the importance of exam preparation, because sometimes folks don't know that the folks that you're going to be competing with in the exam are taking prep classes, and they've been doing it for a long time. And we want to be sure that we're making resources available, like what the CPASS Foundation and its supporters are doing. And then we also want to ensure that we are targeting with education and transparency and accountability the gatekeepers in our academic medical system, ensuring that there is holistic review and process, that folks are looking at more than test scores, that we are addressing biases that influence that process and lead to some of the negative outcomes in terms of underrepresentation in the medical workforce.
That's incredible. Do you have a fact sheet prepared with these recommendations that I can share?
Yeah, I could certainly share some information with you regarding that. I don't know if I shared with you earlier, but I had the privilege of serving on the AAMC and NMA Action Collaborative for Black Men in Medicine, the steering core for that. And so, we have some data in a publication we published in Academic Medicine a few months ago that covers not only some facts with relation to Black men in medicine, but also the broader Black and minoritized community statistics. So yeah, we could do that.
I would love that. I'd like to share that as part of our outreach efforts for CPASS Foundation. That would be fantastic. I just want to invite the audience that's here. Thank you so much for coming again. You're welcome to make a reaction at the bottom of your screen, whatever you're looking at, whether it's on your phone or desktop for the audio chat. There's a little symbol below that says react. And you can do a thumbs up, a laugh, a clap, or a heart, which I think would be really interesting, just to indicate that you're there and breathing. And I do hope to bring people up to the stage to ask questions. I've run some of these audio chats before, and I hope that it's not that difficult to raise your hand, and I can bring you on stage. Okay, so this was really wonderful. I want to ask you about the match, your residency, right? So where did you match, and how can current URIM students position themselves in the residency match process to ensure they're selected for their first choice? And I know I got a couple of questions following up with this, but are you able to share your experience landing a residency and where you were placed? That would be helpful. What's the process like? What should potential medical students expect? I think I've been watching social media for the last couple months, and the whole match process. I don't know if you had a social media experience when you were having a match day, but it's a really big deal. It's a huge social media phenomenon as well.
Yeah, that takes me back, but I remember it vividly in there. There's a lot around it. So
yeah.
So prior to the match is determining what specialty you're going to go into and then where you want to interview. And,
okay.
And I will say, because where you interview influences the match. I've been in Chicago for 20 plus years, but I never imagined that Chicago would be a place that I would live. And two advisors that I had while I was at Howard Med School, one was an associate dean at the medical school, and the other was the CFO of the hospital, mentioned Chicago as being a great place for me to have on my list of places to consider. And so I added programs from Chicago to my interview list our application list for emergency medicine. So long story short, after considering a bunch of programs across the country, I felt that the University of Chicago was a great opportunity for me, not only for its excellence in emergency medicine training, but also the prospect of potentially going to business school in Chicago, which ultimately I did do. And so I was fortunate to match at the University of Chicago. I would say one of the influencers in my decision to rank UFC number one had to do with an individual who was a Howard graduate who had also trained at the University of Chicago. And he and I had a great conversation prior to me putting my rank list in. He had graduated from the program prior to that, but he really emphasized the program's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion before everyone was talking about it. And it was one of the few programs within that storied medical center that was diverse and was making really intentional efforts to be representative of the community that it served. The match day process for me did not involve social media. I think we were all in an auditorium at Howard University. We got our envelopes. We all opened them at the same time. Most folks had smiles. A few maybe faked some smiles. It's hard to imagine. I would say that the social media experience today could be used in a couple of ways. I mean, one, it could, and I think how it impacts individuals depending on their emotional well-being at the time, right? I mean, it could be a source of shared jubilation. It could also probably be a little isolating if it seems like everyone else matched and you didn't. But also, it could be a vehicle for reaching out to resources across the country very quickly to assist you as you're, figuring out what that scramble process might be. It certainly gives the public, and I say the public, I mean folks that aren't doctors or going through that process, a view into what the heck is happening as you move through your medical education process. And so, so I have had a chance to look at many of the social media posts, and it is certainly an event. It seems to mimic some of the college decision day sort of phenomenon that we see as well.
Yeah, it's actually really exciting. I just, part of me, like you said, I get excited when I see the success, but then I feel anxiety over people that haven't found their success with their match, right? That worries me because the social media is so vast, ubiquitous, and omnipotent or something. So I just, to your point, hope that people that aren't getting what they need in terms of their match can find some solace or some help or some mentorship somewhere, which actually leads me to my next question. As you're a Black health professional, how in the world can a Black student or brown student as well, Black and brown, I have to say, and I also want to include women in this space, right? Because all women across all industries are faced with extraordinary barriers to their success. I don't care what industry you're in, but what are some strategies to network in today's healthcare industry specifically? It just seems, since the pandemic, the networking environment is it just doesn't seem as clear cut anymore. And when you're dealing with disparities in inequity and lack of ability to access things, what can you tell us for how we can solve this? How can we get out there and meet people and get what we need for our careers?
So I'm not sure that I have a set of best practices, but I'm happy to share, my experience and perspective on it. One, I think that networking within an individual's medical specialty is a great place to start, because you're starting with areas where there's shared interest. And certainly if there are niches within that particular specialty that you have an interest in, being able to collaborate with other folks around some of those topics as part of the local or national association for that specialty, I think it's a great way to get started. So I encourage individuals to join a committee, join a task force, excuse me, to get that started. I found the National Medical Association to be a great resource for me early in my career. And even as I look back on it, for example, there are not a ton of African-American or Black residency program directors in emergency medicine, or department chairs, or full professors of emergency medicine. But when I look back at the folks that I've been hanging out with at the NMA for the last couple of decades, like 85% of them are in that small group. So I think that's something that folks should not overlook as we think about the value of the medical associations that support our minoritized communities. And then especially considering the geography. So when you think of, I think the experience for a Black or brown healthcare professional in a market like Chicago might be very different from that of a similar healthcare professional that might be in a rural Midwestern state or Southern state where the demographics of physicians of color is much, much different. And so the strategies that you take may be different as well. You talked a bit about the pandemic's impact on networking and social gathering. It can cut both ways. I mean, it's just like you think about how families have been able to reconnect through sort of like regular Zoom meetings. So if you're doing those, you're seeing people that you typically haven't dealt with, typically wouldn't see as frequently. I know that as we move through the social justice movement following George Floyd's death, as well as the impact of COVID-19, I know many individuals who were leading efforts in DEI and health equity found themselves having kind of Zoom sessions, therapy sessions on a regular basis to create that community and help them work through some of those challenges. And to me, that was an example of ways that we can leverage technology to help strengthen networking and sharing of information. So those are my experiences and perspectives. And I'm sure someone has written a book or an article on the best way to get that done.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think in all the industries, and I'm finding, as a brand advisor, there are many, many ways to network. I do think, which is one of the reasons why I was asking how this book has impacted your career, I do think that public speaking is becoming a little bit of a prerequisite for success, especially if you're Black and brown and a woman in any industry. It really does help to be able to communicate and to host conversations and to be able to show up to conversations, to be in an audience and ask questions, and to be present. And this requires a little bit of a different skill than, being in the background. And I think that's challenging for some people. I have some concerns around that because everybody shouldn't have to do that. But I just think that with things that are happening in technology, it's sort of forcing people into that lane to be able to do what you and I are doing right now. For example, I want to ask you a little bit about disparity. Sure. What is going on in the United States with Black doctors? Why aren't there more? Have communities and governments stopped caring about this issue? I mean, I feel like, just to give an anecdote of my own story, and the audience that's listening, I am going to be opening up the floor in a few minutes for questions. I have 3 Black sons, and trying to find a Black doctor, a Black mental health professional, a Black pediatrician, it's so tough for me. And I feel like, what is happening? What do we need to do here? How can people, even CPASS Foundation, schools, can we have an impact on closing this gap? What should we be doing to get more Black doctors in the United States, American Black doctors?
Yeah, I would say we're here. I see a number of them on the LinkedIn audio with us today as well.
Yes.
But you're right. There's substantial underrepresentation of Black and brown and American Indian individuals in medicine. Mm-hmm. And it's not new. And there are many historical factors that have contributed to that over time. And I think certainly as we focus in on Black men in medicine, we know that Black men in society face some really significant challenges and hurdles across their experiences, from primary and secondary education to I won't even get into many of the experiences that folks have faced from a social perspective, and the low expectations that we have in the educational system, and then certainly there are challenges they face in the medical pipeline or medical pathway, where you face discrimination in that process, and that you can't overlook the poor health outcomes that Black men experience and our low life expectancy. So there are a number of factors that contribute to both this challenge, and there are a number of imperatives around why it's something that should be addressed. And I think I would bucket this really around the need for systems changes, and we describe this in our Action Collaborative article that we published in Academic Medicine, and I think they're fit in kind of 2 big buckets or categories. One is things that we need to do on the pre-medical side from a systems factor perspective, and then what we need to do in academic medicine. And so when we look at pre-med, it's important we address some of the financial support issues that impact MCAT preparation, academic preparation, applications to medical school. We need to ensure that folks have access to good information and very solid pre-health advising. So there are things that we need to do to strengthen and standardize and hold pre-health advisors accountable. We also need to ensure that there are good support systems in place that folks can reach out and connect with to help encourage them and give them durability along their journey to applying to medical school, and then certainly ensuring that there are the right foundational academics available, for our young men. Within academic medicine, we need to ensure that our medical institutions are working to identify prospective Black men in medicine early, that their recruitment process is DE&I informed, so that you are actually bringing in the applicant pool that you say you want to have within your school. We need to again ensure that the medical school admissions process is holistic, that they're providing training with regard to implicit and explicit bias and addressing some of the redlining issues I talked about earlier, and leadership accountability. And within the Black Men in Medicine Action Collaborative with the NMA and the AAMC. I happen to have the privilege of co-chairing the Leadership Accountability Work Group with Maureen Cullens, who's at Duke. And so one of the things that we've emphasized is ensuring that the leadership of our academic institutions are moving towards an accountability framework for delivering on this particular need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the accountability framework. We definitely are having an accountability crisis in the United States. So I love that there's actually, people working on putting together a framework, and I would like to extrapolate that to all areas of life in the United States right now. I want to ask you a question about artificial intelligence. The elephant in the room right now, right? You have a certificate in cybersecurity oversight, which you earned in 2021. I would love to understand what you saw then, what you're seeing now, and what are the implications of this in the medical field, and then especially doubling down on how does this impact young people that might be looking around saying, am I even going to be able to become a doctor if artificial intelligence is coming? I know this was a loaded question, but sure. When I was researching about you, I thought, my goodness, he's, not only are you brilliant and you are the abundance for us in the medical space, but I'm like, wow, he's got a certificate in cybersecurity oversight? Please help us understand. And then I do have a question. Someone has their hand raised for a question. So,
Ginger, thank you for being so kind there. I'll address them as two separate items.
Thank you.
The certificate on cybersecurity oversight that I received, I pursued that primarily because I've had the opportunity to serve on several nonprofit university and corporate boards, and so we live in this digital age where we have constant electronic communication and electronic commerce. And global cybersecurity threats are at our virtual doorsteps every single day. And so these, cyber adversaries that we have, may range from, cyber criminals to rogue governments abroad. And so from a governance perspective, I felt that it was really important to be well educated on these threats and appropriate mitigation and what are some of the challenges and responsibilities that individuals who serve on boards of directors and trustees may have as they support, their executives and organizations in leading through cybersecurity incidents, as well as the prevention. Because really, it's not a if it will occur, but when it will occur. And so that's the reason for the cert certificate. With regard to artificial intelligence, I think it certainly provides some significant promise, I think, in multiple aspects of our lives and our educational and work journeys. Certainly, we're seeing some early hints of how it might support physicians and healthcare workers and making diagnoses sooner they might otherwise not make, and perhaps even a promise of helping patients with self-management around certain conditions and getting questions answered. I think we do have to, as we've learned in recent years, we have to study what the unintended consequences may be. And certainly we want to ensure that the use of artificial intelligence doesn't widen the health equity gaps that we see today, because what we call artificial is really going to be the acceleration of inputs that are placed within technology to help us generate information and outcomes. And so inherent therein, I think, of the biases of individuals that are part of the creation of that artificial intelligence. So we need to ensure that we have, both on the tech side as well as on the medical side, individuals from all communities engaged in that process, so they not only were able to contribute to diversity of thought and diversity of artificial intelligence, but also they're there at the table to ask those questions about the unintended consequences to ensure that those outcomes aren't raced by and lead to adverse experiences for communities across the nation and around the world. And so it's possible that these and other technologies may change the role of physicians in the future, and so there may be other characteristics and factors that might need to be more emphasized as we have new technologies and resources that are doing things for us that maybe we had to do ourselves in the past. And I think that's something for our experts in academic medicine to continue to evaluate as we move across, this technological revolution that, we continue to experience. But I think there'll continue to be a role for physicians. I think there's promise with AI, but there's also the potential for unintended consequences. And for those of us who are committed to and have a contact with our communities around health equity, we need to ensure that we have our eyes on that.
I love that. I'd love to open the floor up for questions. I do have more questions around medicine and artificial intelligence, but I want to give people in our audience a chance. I'm really happy to see everyone here, Carson, Yvette, Dominitric, and Trinika, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Travis and Grant, Cheryl Curry, and Dr. McDade, Ben, Ron, Vincent, LeVar, Adi, Dawn, Sharonda, Idiris, I think, or Idris, Kendall, Richard, and Elizabeth. If you would like to hit the react button below, I believe, I'm on the host side, so I don't know what it looks like on the listener side to hit a button to raise your hand to ask a question. Okay, LeVar has a question. And maybe, LeVar, you can let me know where that button is to let other people aware, to let us know how did you do that. And thank you for your reactions who people have put hearts on. Let me bring LeVar up here. Let's see. LeVar, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome to the stage. What is your question for Dr. Robinson? So glad to see you here.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a very important topic, right? So as a Black professional, I actually work in the healthcare field, right? So I work at a healthcare agency, things like that. And equity is always a big thing, but I also mentor. So I think my biggest question, right, is even to get young Black and brown boys and girls thinking about STEM-focused careers, how can we implement it in our schools, right? Because one of my biggest challenges going to the public school system, whether it's here in Baltimore, back in Chicago, or even in Pittsburgh, it's hard for them to grasp the importance of, educating our low-income communities, right, around STEM. So I'm just curious as to how would one kind of navigate that?
Yeah, LeVar, that's a great question. And inherent in that is that not every community has a CPASS Foundation, right? That's helping connect these dots and make it easier to deploy resources in our schools. Certainly, I would say all of our medical schools in the United States should have an interest and requirements around helping advance diversity, and so there should be resources to tap into there to help extend some of those assets into the community for exposure. One of the studies I referenced earlier today found that many of the Black MCAT examinees had actually had exposure during middle school and high school to pre-health programs. Actually are more likely to have some of that exposure than white applicants that replied to that survey, but they were less likely to have an opportunity to shadow a physician. And I think that probably brings home the message that you're indicating, which is, how do we help connect young individuals in our communities with individuals who represent the profession that they want to go into. And so one thing that you may also do is consider reaching out to some of the local medical societies and see if you can get resources from those organizations, volunteers to come out and participate in some programming so that young people get that exposure. A lot of folks are willing to do it, and I think also if programs are flexible now, since we've become so good at using digital technology, that also may be a vehicle for overcoming some of the geographic barriers to creating that exposure. So it may be that you find a doctor in a Chicago or a Washington, D.C. or in Atlanta that may come and help speak to young people in Pittsburgh. For example, it's different than being in person, but these kids are on their phones and devices all the time anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would actually add to that, Dr. Robinson, if I may. Thanks so much for the question, by the way, LeVar. That's fantastic. I also think there's opportunities to tap into corporate relationships. An example I'll give is I work with Google on their Google Digital Coaching Program, and there was a year that I was able to tap one of the program managers at Google and have a conversation, say, I would like to expose some Chicago Public School students to what's happening here on the engineering side at Google. And we were able to bring in some of the top computer science students to have a session which helped them understand how technology is used in the NBA. And it was really wonderful. So I do think programs are helpful, but it's also sometimes great to just tap your corporate relationships and say, hey, listen, I want to do this, and either bring a speaker into the classroom or try to find a way to bring the classroom to the opportunity. Just as another idea, there's just so many different ways to get this job done. It's half the time, half the battle is just asking the question, I want to, and again, thank you for your question. I want to bring Travis up. Travis, welcome to the stage. What's your question for Dr. Robinson?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How are you, Derek? Great to see you,
well.
Dr. Robinson. Great to hear your voice. Awesome. Ginger, been way too long.
I know you.
Thank you guys for hosting this. I stumbled upon this conversation, and this kind of dovetails with the question that LeVar asked, and I am working on, we're about to launch a company called Workforce 21. And for those that don't know what I've done for the last 20 years as an entrepreneur, while I've owned and started and acquired a lot of companies and been in different industries, primarily we worked in workforce. And particularly ensuring equity in the balance of transactional, transformational types of programs. Started off in the federal market and worked back into the private sector, varying levels of roles all the way over as far right as you would see as attorneys working for us in contractual roles, all the way over to drivers in transportation. So I've seen the gambit of career cycles. One of the things that we're focusing on with Workforce 21, which is a self-identifying diverse platform. So when you talked about that, Dr. Robinson, them being at their phones, kids working on their phone, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to engage the Gen Z, potential current student, potential physician, potential lawyer, whatever, and have them go and self-select after an invitation to an event like this on our platform. They'd have the ability to literally connect with you. They would invite you to be a mentor. Literally. So a connection, we're being very, very specific about it. We'll get into that later, but we're going to actually have all of you all participate in this process because we believe that career is this intimate thing that no one talks about until something happens. I literally was faced with my oldest child, who's a graduate in architecture. And during COVID, I found myself telling him something at 25, approaching 25, that my dad had told me 25 years prior when I moved to Chicago, leaving grad school in St. Louis. And it literally was basically to expect to be marginalized, just to net it out, right? And so our goal ultimately is to get away from, in the parenting cycle, whether it's Grant, Reed, Sarai, I'm talking about our children, Dr. Robinson and myself, going from, hey, our innate nature, Ginger, you get it, is to give our children what they want, right? That's what we do. We give them what they want. We want to expose them to everything. And sometimes that actually works where we find that thing that they're good at. I will be transparent and tell you, my two younger kids they love everything they're not good at. They just suck at the stuff that they really want to do. And so to open it up a bit, my daughter just got accepted into a high school. We're still trying to figure out which high school we're going to select and all that good stuff. And she tested in an AP physics. And so one of the things that we're focusing on from an algorithm and identification for self-merit is what you're good at. We're getting away from...
Travis?
Did we lose Travis?
I think we just lost you for a moment. I think you got cut off after the AP thing.
I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. Let me just mention, we have about 9 more minutes, and there's 2 people on stage to ask a question, and I want to just make sure that you get your question in so I can get the other 2 people their question, because that's going to be it.
Okay. And I was going to say, my point was that they're good at parenting even from that, and even mentoring from the position of what you're good at versus maybe what you desire to do what you think you like.
Yes.
And so I think if we started at that at the 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade level, we might have a better chance of exposing them to those careers, getting them in the right programs, and actually have them experiencing success sooner. So obviously we don't kill all of the social or civic equity that, that's a front with them. And I wanted to ask you, Dr. Robinson, and even you, Ginger or Stephen, as you have been in mentoring, you've been doing these programs and having these conversations, when you're talking to the younger audiences, what are you picking up whenever they're communicating with you outside of, just I desire to be ...
I'll let you take that, Dr. Robinson. You're much more succinct than I'm about that because we've got about 8 minutes.
Yeah, I'll just be brief and say that I think young people are pretty good at communicating what they're interested in and what they're not interested in. And I think if you want to maintain their attention and engagement, you've got to give them something that they like. And I think part of what we need to do as we're talking about different professions is, they're going to see kind of what's on the marquee, but we need to let them see what's underneath it as well, in terms of kind of the diversity of things that you can do. Like you can be a doctor, but I mean, how many different types of specialties are there within medicine? If you want to be a lawyer, you can be a lawyer, but lawyers have jobs in so many different areas. And so I think as we give them those deeper dives, we can get a sense for how it might align with something that they're interested in that they didn't think was aligned with that particular professional, but now they see that as being on their menu of options.
Well, I love that. We have 2 more, Vincent, I'm hoping we can get your question in. I'm not sure. So I'm going to start with, I think Ben or Andy, which one of you were first? I apologize. I was so wrapped into Travis's beautiful story that I don't know who was first. Ben, why don't we start with you? What is your question? Because we have a few minutes left.
Brilliant, thank you. So my name is Ben Chansu. I actually know Dr. Robinson. I think we both served on the Blue Venture Fund on the clinical advisory group. So great individual in person, always admired the work you do. Maybe a comment and then a question. So I think we're all in healthcare. We understand some of these disparities. I think it's critical to have, a great feeder system into medical schools. As you mentioned, some of the challenges with, gaining access to medical schools. I think we both know that, representation drives outcomes in the healthcare business and in clinical practice today. And I guess my question to you, Dr. Robinson, is, how can we provide more support to you in your endeavors around equity, diversity, and representation?
That's a great question. I would say that, partnering with organizations in the local community, I think would be the best way to do that. My efforts are really not about, what I can do as an individual. I think the real opportunity that I've seen is the ability to work with organizations and try to have impact at scale. And so if we can help empower organizations, like the CPASS Foundation and others who are working collaboratively with young people in the communities and with the primary and secondary educational system and medical institutions to help with the exposure, help with the preparation. I think, those activities are really critical. We need more of those now. And so I think that would be my recommendation.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to bring, is it Ade on stage? Thank you so much for your question, Ben. That was brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Ginger and Dr. Robinson. Good to hear from you. My question is kind of similar to Ben's, which is just more, from your perspective as a CMO of a health plan, where do you see the biggest opportunities for addressing health equity, especially in Black communities?
Yeah, I think on the health plan side, there are probably 2 main levers. One is how do we help enhance the health literacy and the ability to be self-advocates for health plan members or patients. And then the other is how do you effectively partner with your the healthcare providers that you have really strong relationships with to help ensure that you prioritize the pursuit and achievement of health equity in those relationships, such that it's part of what you're talking about. When you talk about clinical quality, you're talking about, how is care being delivered in an equitable fashion to deliver equitable outcomes for patients, and how do you ensure that your financial incentives and rewards align with that narrative as well, and having conversations about the workforce that's delivering care and how that aligns with the demographics of the communities that are being served, the distribution of access to primary care and specialty care across the geography where you have members at, and just ensuring that those relationships are being used appropriately to help us achieve the level of access, level of trust, and improved outcomes that are necessary for us to all be healthy and for our economy to thrive and do well.
That was so excellent. I actually think we have time for 2 more questions, Dr. Robinson. Ade, thank you for that question. I love it. This is such an invigorating conversation for me. It's giving me a lot of hope. Vincent, welcome to the stage. What is your question for Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. My question gonna be very brief. I just want to ask whether, in addition to his medical degree, having a business degree from the University of Chicago has really enhanced his career. I'm just asking that because I'm exploring going to the University of Chicago for an MBA.
Yeah, thanks, Vince, for the question. I'll answer briefly and say that I think it has. I think it's allowed me to walk in some doors and go in some rooms that otherwise I may not have had that opportunity. So there's some validation, from that perspective. I think also it's given me a different lens through which to do problem solving that was different than sort of the scientific method, right? For someone that's a physician with an undergraduate degree in science, we typically approach problems from a certain vantage point. And so certainly for me, business school was very instructive and was very helpful in that. And the last thing I would just say, I think experience matters as well. And so those business experiences that individuals are able to accumulate over time, whether it's successes or failures or in between, can have a phenomenal impact on career trajectory going forward.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for that. Maybe I should go get my MBA as well. It sounds tremendous. I mean, I love school. Trinika, you have the honor of taking the last question, and we actually are at time. So if you could let Dr. Robinson know what you'd like to ask, that would be great. Thank you for coming on stage. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm a third-year resident in emergency medicine at UChicago, Dr. Robinson, of which is really well-regarded alumni. So thanks for speaking with us. So as I'm going into my final year of residency, I'm really strongly considering pursuing a fellowship in health policy. I'm hoping to be able to use leverage my training and relationships with people like legislators and large institutions that address health inequities. So what do you see as the role of large corporations like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois to assist with community engagement and specifically the educational aspects of pipeline programming? And then more so, how do we as physicians specifically leverage those relationships with these bodies to help advance that mission?
That is a great question. So I'm going to try to answer it briefly, but you and I can also grab some time offline as well. I think it's important for corporations within the health insurance industry and beyond to be engaged in supporting exposure to health professions to young people in the community. And we, for example, just had a group of students from a local Chicago public school, high school, in our office yesterday doing just that, leveraging our physicians and nurses to provide that exposure, share their testimonials, and equip those young people with some health skills that will help advance their work. And then we also have the chance to work with organizations like the CPASS Foundation, like I Am Able, like with Dr. Pratt down at UFC and others. And so we have to dig deep into those relationships to play a role in helping create the healthcare landscape that we know our communities need. So I've been happy to be a part of that, and look forward to having a follow-up conversation with you about your future.
Okay, well, that was brilliant, Shanika. I loved it. I really loved this conversation. I want to thank everyone for joining us today at the CPASS Foundation, and thank you again, Dr. Robinson, for having this wonderfully vibrant, informative conversation. I encourage everyone in the audience to please connect with everybody. Take a screenshot if you need to. This is a great platform to, again, expand and develop your network. There's still a few people on the call. I do encourage you to engage with all the speakers that came on stage, like CPASS Foundation, follow our page, and definitely connect with Dr. Robinson and everybody else here. Please join us next week, Tuesday, April 25th at 10 a.m. Central for part 2 of our conversation series, Creating Equity in STEM. We will be featuring former Google engineer, founder, and career coach Anthony D. Mays. He is amazing, and he's got a lot of strategies on how to pass the engineer exam to get a job at Google. So thank you again for joining, and have a fantastic weekend.